Welcome to another episode of the Aetherica podcast. I am Sky Mathis here with Ike Baker. And I just
Howdy.
wanted to say before we get into it, I'm just so honored to be doing these with you. Every episode is like I'm in school or in a class with a brilliant professor of the esoteric. So it's just an honor for me. So I just want to say I really appreciate it. You.
Yeah, man. I mean, you flatter me, but in the circles I hang out in, I'm small potatoes, but I'm happy to really honored to be able to speak with somebody like you who is not pretentious and somebody who is humble and knowledgeable about the things that he takes an interest in and again professes to understand in any way, but still open to learn. And that to me makes a good teacher. It makes a good, magician, whatever, philosopher, whatever you want to do. Those are the makings of, those are the traits that I aspired to when I was learning a lot of this stuff. And I'm still learning, and I'm going to be learning for the rest of my life. So thank you for giving me the outlet to have these conversations, because I learn from them too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, with that, let's dive into it. So something very interesting that I've been wanting to touch on is this relationship between the world of the esoteric and occult and cryptography as the art of writing or solving codes. Whether it's a mystery school teaching that one unlocks mysteries, or a symbolic system of language of some kind, one has to learn certain keys for understanding like a particular text, or like within alchemy, for example, or even modern digital or economic security apparatuses have to do a lot with cryptography and decoding things and things along these natures. So I thought this would be a really fun one to kind of just explore these ideas with esoterica and cryptography. And I really think they go hand in hand in a lot of ways. And even if you look at figures like Crowley, which I know is your personal favorite occultist, I say that very sarcastically.
He's just overhyped. That's all. I mean, at the end of the day, he's about as harmless as a horsefly.
Yeah. And yeah, he himself, I believe he was involved with British intelligence as well. I'm sure you probably come across that, but yeah, even thinking about like sigil creation or things of that nature, kind of piecing together elements of meaning into some kind of unique way in a cryptographical form that one would have to have the knowledge. I'd have to have the knowledge of like what elements are included within it that make up the thing to then begin to decode its meaning. And I think maybe like with initiatory orders, speaking from more of my speculation, it seems to me like within some orders there's a real cryptographic nature to them within maybe the act, as perhaps like many things, maybe acting as like a mechanism of preservation of purity, and or a structure acting as a multi-layered cryptographic hermetic like distillation apparatus, if you will, like a refining one. And as one individual is kind of moving through, as they begin this sort of inner decoding process, they're kind of unlocking and unveiling codes and or understandings of nature. And so just want to throw that out there. And
yeah,
two in particular individuals I thought would be cool to look at tonight were Trithemius and Ramon Llull. But yeah, before we do, is there anything that you have in response to all of that I've laid out?
Yeah, well, first off, I don't really know too much about Raymond Lull. I understand his work within the context of alchemy, which is to say that there really is I mean, that's not true, but he wasn't a big proponent of it. Let's say somebody like Thomas Aquinas was, again, working within that, monastic Christian worldview. We tend to forget that these guys were all like Christian priests and monks, because that's who was educated and interested in any of this stuff. You weren't taught philosophy if you worked on a farm. And it wasn't, they didn't have this institution of public schooling. That's very recent. It was all private tutors and things like that back then, reserved for the nobility who could pay for it and had the time to learn. But Trithemius is a very interesting character to me. But one of the first things I want to point out is that magic is and just in general, right? I mean, it all boils back to Plato. He talks about forms. Forms are, in the Golden Dawn, we say by names and images are all powers awakened and reawakened, In things like Rosicrucianism, where you see all of these diagrams, in Freemasonry, right? A beautiful system of morality veiled in allegory, illustrated by symbols. The symbols themselves are the teachings. That's how they've been able to pass through the ages. Commentary is everything else, but the symbols themselves teach, and it relies on this idea that anything that exists in the physical realm and is intelligible by the senses and the rational part of the human mind is something that is expressing an ideal, which is outside of time and deathless. They are kind of the dream stuffs of the mind of God, the building blocks upon which the scaffolding, really, upon which the material forms rely, merely as vehicles of their essence. So, but another point is, you look at something like the Sefer HaYetzirah, and it expounds the 22 creative forces of the universe, the utterances of the divine coming forth as letters, right? Language was a miracle. It is miraculous. It's insane. To me, it's nothing short of a testament to the indwelling, spiritual, self-aware, really psyche in the truest, the most literal sense of that word, the indwelling soul, attempting to kind of reintegrate, right, through things like communication and using these forms and these sounds. And really, in magic, anything and everything is symbolic. It can be, and it is symbolic. So, and that's Platonic, really, when you get down to it. And that's the dominant paradigm, philosophical and otherwise. This is a general Western worldview, is based on Plato, and these men would have been steeped in it because they came through, the seminary, the educational machine of Catholicism of their day. And that's why they took an interest in this stuff. How else would they have known about it? What do they watch, like a Teal Swan video? No, they didn't. They learned about this shit. It was either like literally like cow shit and sheep, or you're in a church learning, words, and math. So it's that's what the world was. And we are very lucky, but also extremely spoiled to have, the most powerful informational tool in the history of creation sitting at our fingertips. It's it can either elevate us or destroy us. But so language as symbol and language as sacred, really, I think that's the underlying, I guess, highfalutin esoteric idea. But I think there was a much more immediate need to deal in cipher, and that is to simply, again, you're gonna pay for this shit back then. It's not like now. where people will think you're weird. It'll be a little socially awkward, but because we're basically grown children, it's like, you know, the worst thing that's ever happened to us. When back then it was actually the worst thing that ever happened to them, is to be found out that they had a real interest in this. I mean, Trithemius was constantly falling in and out of favor with people. You know, I'm pretty sure they moved him around because of his interest in the occult. You know, his thing was that he kind of he made libraries, right? That wasn't really a thing back then. It was, you know, like maybe, yeah. I mean, it wasn't until really Cardinal Richelieu in the Renaissance created like one of the first public libraries, and you had you had guys like John Dee and Trithemius, you know, kind of having these private collections of texts and things like these mini Alexandrias, and you know, he was known to have some weird, some you know, no stuff in his libraries, and so you had to, and he wasn't like he was some like off in the broom closet cleric. He was a bishop, right? He was an abbey, really, an abbot. I'm sorry. So he was the head. I mean, he was the guy in the spotlight. He couldn't be caught doing this shit, really. So I think that's probably a more immediate necessity, right? Because these guys they weren't people that lived in private homes. They were constantly 24/7 under the eye of clerical authority of the Catholic Church.
Indeed, I'll read a brief abstract as a little bit of a primer for. Do you pronounce it Johannes or Johannes Trithemius?
I say Johannes because initially, like, that's what the J was. The J was like a different form of I.
So Johannes Trithemius was an abbot from the Benedictine monastery of Spanheim, and later the monastery of Wurzburg. During his studies in Heidelberg, he was involved in learned humanistic societies, and later he applied the ideal of humanistic eloquence in his works. Trithemius built large libraries, like you said, and wrote a number of mystical, monastic, historic, and biographic writings. He became famous especially due to his book Steganographia. Steganographia.
Steganographia.
Yeah.
Steganographia, yeah.
Which dealt lost my place. Hold on.
Stegosaurus.
Stegosaurus. Which dealt keep losing my place. Which dealt with cryptography on the basis of natural magic and astrology, working with angelic mediations. Through Steganographia remained in manuscript form. It influenced occult sciences in the 16th century and cryptography. Trithemius was also accused of necromancy and demonic magic. So I was wondering.
There it is.
And I believe he was the teacher of Agrippa, as well as I think Paracelsus. Do we have any information or indications of who Trithemius's teachers may have been, or any of maybe his close associates or contemporaries or anything along those lines, as far as your knowledge is concerned?
Not to my knowledge. That's what makes Trithemius so interesting, is that he's just this kind of mystery man, at least to people in the occult. I'm sure there's some academic out there that's like squeezed every drop out of his biographical information that is possible at this time, but I'm unaware of it. You know, he is one of those people who was a master. When Agrippa he encouraged Agrippa to write the 3 books, do his work, and he consulted him. You know, Trithemius was privy to several drafts of the 3 books. As we understand it now, the 3 books is it's, you know, not to be disrespectful, it's the Bible of Western magic. And it's so little understood because we're reading it from a modern perspective. We're reading it as if it's like, don't get me wrong, some of it's a little, it's just like, my God. But with the, like I don't know, the carrot is good. I'm making this up, but something like carrot is good for your sex life because it resembles a penis. It's like some of that stuff is like to a modern person is like not, we just can't, it's superstition. But I mean, Agrippa himself says, like, look, I'm not putting in the good stuff because I can't. But if you've got your wits about you, you'll figure out what I'm saying. And that was kind of Trithemius's MO, right? Like you want to, if you want to get what this says, you got to work for it. And it's, I mean, that's evident in things even up like modern secret society, quote unquote, secret societies. I like to call them esoteric orders, but I don't know how esoteric masonry is. But it's everything is kind of a cipher. Everything is a symbol. Everything is one thing outwardly and has different meanings inwardly or in different contexts. So, to an extent, the entire Western esoteric tradition can be said to be a cipher, right, for the underlying truth, because it can't be communicated in any other way. You have to come to it for yourself, but that's not to say that. So if I say, right, I'm going to use an analogy right here, and I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, but it's late and I'm packing my pipe. If I were to say, listen, I'm going to give you a few clues on how to get to my house. Okay? I'll be waiting there for you. I'm going to give you a few clues. That's it. You have to do the work to get to my house on your own. You have to find my house. And then you went out and you arrived at my neighbor's down the block. And then you said, well, you said I had to find it on my own. Yeah, but that's not my house. It's the same thing with esoteric teaching. By me telling you you have to come to the truth on your own doesn't mean that you come to your own truth. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You don't get to just say, well, this is my truth. Good luck. It's not, that's not, then you've missed the point of the esoteric order. So at least in those preliminary phases. So I think that tradition of secrecy and diligence and the inability to really say what you mean, because what you the understanding, the personal gnosis of the objective truth that you have experienced is incommunicable via words. So I can only point you to this direction, but you'll know it, and I'll know it when you've gotten there. I think that's incredibly powerful. I think Trithemius instilled, I mean, this is pure speculation, but I think that Trithemius instilled that in Agrippa, and I think that's why he was such a successful student and why he encouraged Agrippa, right? Why would a man like Trithemius encourage Agrippa to write the 3 books and then give him notes on his drafts and point him in certain directions if those 3 books didn't have it, to me, that is the surest sign that if we're not understanding Agrippa, then we had better try harder.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I was coming across something along the lines of, like, I think it was like pretty angelically oriented, and there's some stuff I'd come across in regards to like basically the art of transmitting of like messages between people, like sending messages like psychically, and he had like these operations. There was a book I come across called Trithemian Conjuration. I'm not sure if it was that one because there was a couple different ones I was looking at, but there was that, and then some other stuff along the lines of drawing spirits into crystals. And I don't know if this was a lot of Enochian based stuff or what, but I was wondering if you had any insights into the in regards to like that practice of sending messages, because that was very interesting to me, like being able to have this success with have doing some kind of operation in order to psychically transmit and send messages between yourself to another individual or something along these lines.
I would say that I've had experiences like that are more dream based. At least intentionally. I feel like that has happened many times unintentionally. Both from me and to me, from people that I am, I'll put it this way, energetically enmeshed with. You know, somebody like a fiance, somebody like a roommate who's like a close friend of yours. You're gonna know what they're thinking sometimes, and it's gonna scare the shit out of you. It's gonna scare the shit out of them if you do it, if that happens often enough. But on purpose, I've done it with dreams, and I think you and I kind of spoke about it. And there was a lot of failures and like one repeated success with like this one person. It was happening exactly the way I wanted it to. I did not avail myself of angelic intermediary or angelic intercession. There are specific techniques that are taught by Golden Dawn and Golden Dawn adjacent people and communities, orders, particularly the stuff I want to say like the beginning of the 20th century. Dion Fortune was good with stuff like that. That's why I really resonated with a lot of Dion Fortune. I'm somebody who enjoys the intellectual stuff for the sake of context and communication. But at the end of the day, what I'm about is the work, the psychic work, the spiritual work, the scrying, the theurgy, all that stuff. That's what I'm about. There are certain consequences of broadcasting that stuff to an audience of any number. So I'll do as much as I can without violating kind of like, and it's not because of oaths, you know, it's kind of like if you think about it alchemically, like you have to seal the retort. You know, you break your alembic, and that's what you're shattering your alembic when you show it to people, and you know when you try too hard, that's a huge thing. You know, that's one thing that I respected about. I think it was Damien Eccles when he was talking about some sort of ritual, and he's just like, the best thing you can do afterwards is just fucking forget about it for a little while, get it out of your head, go do something different. But so I've had a little bit of experience with that stuff. I'll tell you what I had really good experience with, but that I've had very good results with. At a certain point in the Golden Dawn trajectory, there are several exercises that I kind of like extended on my own. I didn't make a book. I'm not going to teach anybody this. It's just something that kind of naturally happened. I took the Golden Dawn teaching like you're supposed to do and kind of, you know, do your thing with them. But do them. Don't do a different thing. Don't change them. But, you know, as you kind of intuitively progress, you can experiment a little bit within the confines of safety and the system. And one of the things is the manipulation or control of the sphere of sensation or the aura. You're learning to control your aura. And that is one of the most powerful ways to, like I've made people cry, you know, and literally, you know, kind of make them think that their idea or my idea was theirs, not for any manipulative purposes or anything like that. And a lot of this stuff was happening by accident. That's one thing that you don't really want to do as a theurgist is be constantly projecting your will onto the, you know, just like willy-nilly. You know, you want to have a direct purpose. Is this serving a good, you know, not just my good, what I want, what Ike, you know, wants. It's not it's not really about that. So but the control of the sphere of sensation, the aura, and then utilizing spheres along the middle pillar and extending particularly the Tifereth center, right? can have a very strong effect on the field or energetic body of those, within proximity. Now, I've seen stuff like distance healing and Reiki go really, really well, and I've done a little bit of that through Golden Dawn avenues, things like the Rose Cross ritual and certain Martinist and Martinist related groups. I've done some more healing stuff, but I tend not to try and screw with people, because that's ultimately what you're doing. At the end of the day, after you've kind of experimented to gratify your own curiosity and see if you could satisfy a sense of accomplishment, but what did it do?
Right.
If anything, now it's going to take me some time to work off that pride.
Sure. Yeah. So when I was poking through that book, that Trithemian conjuration book, I had also come across something you're probably familiar with, the Heptameron, or the elements of magic, and it seemed like they both kind of had a lot of yeah, looked like they both had a lot of the similar sort of sigils within those texts. So I'm not sure if what came first, if I don't know, maybe what do you have a little bit of background on the Heptameron?
Well, I'm pretty sure it's angelic magic. I have it. I've not read it yet. It's a short book, but it's basically spirit summoning. And actually what's pretty interesting is that I think some of the what we were talking about in another episode concerning some of the diagrams we were looking at concerning the Elu Cohen and their Christian theurgy draws on some of that stuff, some of the protective circles, magical circles, and things like that. But what I'm really, the overall thing regarding the thing that is at the core of the similarities that they have, whether or not they have them, is again this Christian magic that utilizes angelic forces. And we see that even in the Golden Dawn, we see that in the Elu Cohen, we see that in modern magical orders. You're using angelic forces, archangelic forces, to towards an end of theurgy. Theurgy means different things at different times for different people. I think a theurgist in this time was somebody who summoned spirits and worked in the name of Christ and summoned angels and things like that. Not necessarily somebody that was trying to ascend spiritually. I'm not, again, that's kind of my take on what I've read and what I've experienced. Theurgy is a little malleable. It's definitely different from sorcery because you're dealing with different intentions. You're dealing with different entities, or at least a different a different protocol in the way that you work, and the intentionality that you work in, and the current that you work in. But ultimately, you've got all of this boiling down to Christian magic, angelic magic, and really the evocation of spirits. And it's definitely a different kind of magic. One of the things that was pointed out to me by Dr. Skinner was that, by way of conversation, and also by, in reading the introductory chapters to his book Greco-Egyptian Magic, is that the magic of evocation does not necessitate that you be spiritually developed, right? And adept of magic of evocation is one that it has learned to call forth specific entities for specific purposes, and to a degree that's even angelic magic. Angels tend to be a little neutral. It's not like this love and light You know, if anything, it's kind of this foreign disinterest. Really, it's not typically what you would expect. But you know, you use various what they would call synthemata in the Amblician kind of Neoplatonic theurgic way. You use incense, you use color, sound, names, right, vibration, to get this entity, which is real and objective, but does not have a concrete material form, to come forth, you know, and then commanded to do something. If it's angelic, could be help, it could be intercession in somebody's health, it could be intercession, you know, kind of the purgation of sin, or you know, all that stuff, the Christian stuff. On the other hand, if you have like goetic sorcery, you could be like in the PGM, you could just be calling forth a demon to pull a chicken bone out of your sister's throat, or something like that. You know, like it could be something extremely like painfully mundane. And that's really the biggest affirmation to me, is like, oh, these magicians they weren't these spiritual theurgists trying to ascend and awaken this Christic solar force in themselves. They were basically just guns for hire that are, instead of contracting people, they're contracting entities to do, you know, mundane things. So that's working within the Christian milieu. You see that a lot, the angelic stuff with Pietro de Albano. You see it again, obviously in the things that we're talking about, and then you see it in D, which is really cool, because I've always kind of found D and Trithemius to have a lot of similarities, particularly with things like, okay, you had Trithemius, who was a master of language and coding, and then you had D, who literally, you know, he basically translated an angelic language. So
Yeah, with a lot of these like sort of associated pentacles and or altar glyphs that are kind of associated with a lot of this sort of thing, it seems like that might be a lot of where the kind of cryptographic nature of thing comes into play, because when you look at a lot of them, they're conglomerations of a lot of, there's like Hebrew, and then there's alchemical symbology, and then there's Enochian, and like these angelic seals and whatnot encoded with some of the stuff. And so I think it's right, you know, these days we have like the ability to research online and look up all these things really quickly, but back then, man, that must have been quite a task to familiarize yourself and understand all of the meanings and really thoroughly be able to organize it all in a comprehensive manner. I mean, it's just amazing, the fact that like a guy like Trithemius and what knowledge he must have had, along with John Dee, which I think he had quite a pretty extensive library as well.
Yeah, John Dee was the man. I think nobody has done more for the magical arts since then, since Dee. But where are you seeing the Enochian? You might be confused. Confusing that with Stephen.
Yeah, let me pull up a screen share. You might be right. Maybe it is Debian. Let me get your eye on this. Screen share this.
Well, what context is it?
It's in a pentacle or something. Let me know when you can see my screen.
I can see it now. I just don't see anything.
Okay, I'm scrolling through. Hold on one second. Okay, right here. Is that Debian? Or is
I can't see.
Okay, let me zoom in. Actually, let me copy this image. Paste.
What is this?
So this is, first I'll zoom in, and then we can zoom in a little bit more. Okay. Is it fairly clear on your end?
That's good. That's better.
Okay. So this is second table of practice design based on FRRO's WRC with zodiacal angels and god names.
Where did you pull this from?
So this is from a text called Reviewing the Trithemian Conjuration.
Yeah, I don't see any Enochian on there. If anything, I see like,
okay,
yeah, that's not Enochian. If anything, it's like this particularly stylized version of Hebrew, and I'm not even sure I see Theban.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking like clearly those three words within that triangle are Hebrew, but this is a stylized version of Hebrew on these outer edges. Is that what you're saying?
That's what it seems to be to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I see Aleph, I see Mem, I see Resh. I forget what this stylizing is called, but
okay.
It's definitely something that
new to me.
Yeah, it's that you see. So you see, do you see the astrological glyph of Taurus on that outer corner at about like 11:30?
Right here? Or wait, that's not.
No, that's Cancer. Keep going. That's Taurus right there.
Right here? Okay.
Yeah. So if you look to, I guess it's on my left. That's an Aleph.
Right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
And next to that looks like a Samek. And then after that is a Mem. Then you have a Val, a Resh, another Aleph. And I'm not sure, it might be a Zadi. But yeah, so that's a different kind of Hebrew, I believe. It's definitely not Enochian. Okay. Enochian also wouldn't have been available to Trithemius because like the Enochian didn't come out until I think a True and Faithful relation. So maybe like 1700s, 1800s.
Okay.
Because those were private manuscripts. Dee never published them.
Yeah, for me they're all, just so I don't even know what I'm looking at really. So it kind of speaks to the whole cryptographic nature of it all. And then I wanted to ask you about this and see if you know anything about. Let me screen share again. These are called church house type monstrances. I don't know what these are or what they're used for, and I wonder if you...
The monstrance is what you keep. I believe it's what you keep the host in.
Oh, okay.
I forget. Like it's a very old-fashioned term, and like you see all that gold.
Lots of gold, yeah.
Very Catholic.
Yeah, really gaudy.
So yeah, but the monstrance typically is where specifically the consecrated host, I'm pretty sure, goes in the monstrance. I think we've in the church in which I am a deacon, I think we have used something to that effect, but we don't always have a monstrance, and it never looks that gaudy.
Yeah. Pretty cool. I hadn't come across those till now. I was going to ask you, within any of the traditions that you're currently involved with, is something like spirit, like drawing spirits into crystals, is that something that's a practice, or is that just kind of like a separate offside thing?
No way. Not at my level anyway. My question is why? Like,
yeah.
What? Let me ask you a question. When you're, maybe you're late for work, maybe you're stopping off at fucking Burger King or something. If somebody pulled you out of your car, like, here, come hang out in my closet. Like what's the point? On the other hand, what are we talking about in terms of spirit, right? Like this kind of the biggest problem in the occult and esoteric, aside from, just the internet and lazy, misinformed people, is that we don't have this like unified specific lexicon. You could say spirit. I mean, like etheric energy.
Right.
Or you could say spirit, and you could think like, Asmodel, Mikael, any of these Hashmoda, well, whatever it is, Hasiel, you could be talking about some of that stuff. And so what kind of spirit are we talking about? If we're talking about pulling in energy to consecrate a crystal or amplify it for some particular usage, then sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's talismanic magic 101. You usually consecrating a stone before you do like a flashing tablet or a magic square. So yeah, you would do that. But like to pull a spirit into a stone is just kind of like, again, it seems arbitrarily willful. On the other hand, whatever, to each his own, but I wouldn't include that specifically on my path. But touching upon the idea of magic squares, right? Magic squares are another type of cipher, but they're ciphers, right? That's where we draw sigils from. A sigil is typically drawn from something else. The sigil connects either words or either letters or numbers, but it forms a word or a pattern that is translated to be typically the energetic signature in a way, right? The essence, a signature of the essence, a symbol meant to convey a particular essence. And in magic squares, that's done so mathematically. So there's this connection with an abstract essence through mathematics into some kind of expression of its nature. So that in and of itself, a magic square that's why you have to learn sigils, because you'll take a sigil, nobody know what the hell it is. It look like a bunch of squiggly lines. If it's a traditional sigil, and all you have to do is take the sigil and place it over the magic square, and you can figure out what it is. Of course, you'd have to know what kind of magic square it is. You'd have to have some clue as to its meaning. Otherwise, you could be working on a square of the sun, which is completely different, than like a square of Mars or Venus, or Saturn, right? Small square, tiny square. You take something like the square of the sun, which is fairly enormous, and you're just not going to be able to figure it out. You do have to have some education.
Yeah, that was something I always had kind of been curious about with all like the old sigils that we find, was how they were derived. And I guess magic squares is where it's at in that regard.
Yeah, there are other methods too, but I don't think I can talk about that.
Do you have any other particular insights or anything in regards to Trithemius that you would want to speak about? There's just so little really written about, at least that I had come across. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not certain it would do too good to know too much about guys like him. I think that Trithemius was somebody who, I think he had to have been a great teacher, because he taught the greats, right? Paracelsus, Agrippa. We're still talking about these guys. We're still looking at their books. I think that's the way he taught the world, was through his students, right? I mean, there's even something suggestive about the nature of his secrecy, it being inherent. If he kept the cipher, like, it could have been because he didn't want to ever have anything in writing. It could be because he never wanted to be the author of one of those things. It was just a natural consequence of, not having hard drives and things like that. You have to write stuff down in that context. So I think that if we pay close attention to what his students had to say, we'll inevitably encounter at least the essence or the core of his doctrines, which are not, nobody owns this stuff. It transcends us. We're vessels for it. That's what makes somebody truly an initiate, in I guess the mundane sense. You become a custodian, and a link of transmission for truths that transcend you, but that somehow you can only express. It can only come through you in this. It can only come out in this way through you, and so I think that's important to remember when we're talking about the historicity or life details of these people.
Absolutely. So Raymond Lull, I'm very interested in Raymond Lull, or Lully, or pseudo-Lullian stuff. He's just a man of mystery as well. And I'll pull up on the screen some significantly cryptic texts that were sent to me by a friend of his that I had not come across till pretty recently.
A friend of who? Raymond Lull?
No, a friend had sent them to me, these documents. But
I'm like, are you summoning spirits of the dead into crystals?
No. Not there yet. One of the points that he said to me when he sent them was that one really has to ignore all the commentaries and just study the source works with no preconceived notions. And that is excellent advice for like pretty much anything in the occult. Yeah. Just to begin to understand what's really being said instead of kind of grasping onto definitions and whatnot, and leaving the code words as open variables. And after a while, you'll start to kind of become more familiar and things will become more clear. He said exactly what you said earlier. They call it a mystery tradition for a reason, and I would have to agree with that. But yeah, let me pull up some of these because these are really cool ones, and I think they're more like alchemical in nature for sure. But there's a lot of other ones that I don't even know. I'm not really familiar with the script type or anything like that, and I'll blow these up so that you can see them better. But so this is
beautiful
big book. But yeah, let's like blow one of these up. I mean, there's just so much depth and detail and information, and it looks like that is...
reminds me of the Hierophant card of the tarot.
Oh yeah, is that Latin? It's probably Latin.
I can't see. You'd have to get way closer.
Zoom in.
Can you get any closer than that? Oh, there we go. I can still barely see it.
I could blow it up more.
Yeah, can you go up a little bit? Like, can you scroll up?
Oops.
It's cool because what I can see of it is yeah, that's Latin. Yep, that's Latin. What I can see of it kind of reminds me of like Elvish from Lord of the Rings.
Oh shit, I fucking lost my...
Yeah, that's Latin. Absolutely. It's beautiful penmanship too. I wish I wrote like that, man. I do a lot of writing with calligraphy pens too, actually, to try and get that, but it's just so consistent.
Yeah. And then like this one, I think there's a little bit of a lag from when this goes to you, but do you see this one with the tree and these different...
Yeah. Are those like phoenixes?
Looks like it. Phoenixes or eagles or something.
Yeah. Seeing those crossed keys there, the gold and the silver, and then the gold on gold. That's also present in the Hierophant card too. They're just interesting. It's
And then so we got stuff like this. These little... There's a lot of these pages they'll have like a letter in the middle, and then surrounding letters, and then words surrounding those letters.
The biggest thing that you can do, the best thing that you can do is always view it from the position of, well, first of all, look at the numbers. Even if it's just letters, count how many segments there are. You always want to do that. I mean, if I have to put money on it, I'd say I bet there's 12 squares there.
Let's see. 1, 2, 3.
No, I think I was off. Maybe like 14.
7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 16 on this one.
Right. So still that is going to have some significance. It's going to have some bearing on this, these particular numbers. And then you would look at the letters. I would, always assume that this is kind of to one degree or another, this is expressive of an emanative kind of model. So in other words, you see something like that with the A in the middle, or here, what you've got going on now, it looks like a V, but it's in Latin, it would be U. There's some kind of essential expression, that is the center of the universe right there. That is the monad, the figure of the monad of this entire, the generative monad of the entire scheme of the diagram. That would be the first couple of things. I'd be counting everything, and then
yeah.
But I mean, what's the context around this? And also, I'm interested to know what really draws you to Raymond Lull. I know you said you're super interested.
I think it's the alchemy, which this document in particular right here, I honestly have no clue. There's just lots of very interesting artwork, but there's this other one, and what I find interesting about this one, let me open up. So like these got a bunch of these, and these are very alchemical, like you can see. Hold on, let me find. There's the terminology in it, which is like secunda, that's like an alchemical, the secunda work, and then it has prima figura, let me go, secunda figura,
first figure, second figure,
tertiary, tertiary, secunda. These are like the alchemical, even like Bartlett, I think he has his named after those for his classes and stuff. But also what's really interesting, especially about this one in particular, is that I've heard a lot of people talk about how Paracelsus was the original first individual to bring in the salt principle within alchemy. But like in this, you clearly see salt, sulfur, and mercury in the center, and the salt, that salt symbol is used throughout these, and it's pertaining to alchemy. And I think, I might be wrong, but I think that Raymond Lull was before Paracelsus. So that's
might have been. I think he died in the 1300s. Paracelsus was what, 1500s?
Let's see.
Because I think Paracelsus was technically like right at the beginning of the Renaissance, right?
Yeah, Raymond Lull was 1232 to 1315. So if these are authentic, if this document is an authentic document, then that to me is very interesting.
And you also, well, I mean, it's extremely interesting. Actually, you might have stumbled upon something that's pretty cool. But also, don't forget that you had mentioned earlier, like this pseudo-Lullian corpus.
Right.
So, that if that belongs to that, if this belongs to that body of work, then it could have been done at a later date. But it is. I mean, it's beautiful to look at, and these something about these looks very Rosicrucian to me. It doesn't look. I'm not getting the, like, for the time period, I'm not getting that like extremely Catholic, extremely Christian sort of expression of these ideas. And I wasn't aware that alchemy, particularly in diagrammatic form like this, was as sophisticated during this time period. I thought it was,
me neither.
Right, because in the Middle Ages, at that point, that's where we are with Lull. It's kind of been debased. It's at least in Europe, right? It was doing really well in over in the Perso-Arabic custodianship at that point, right? I mean, I think it's from Jabir that gives us, that really notices the mercury and the sulfur principles. But I don't recall it I don't recall having read or heard that it was this kind of sophistication. I think at that point it was a lot of puffers, a lot of fraudsters.
Yeah, and
But then it doesn't preclude the possibility that this guy really knew this shit at a very esoteric level.
yeah, and so it's possible that maybe somewhere along the line someone came along and maybe created all of these based off of his work and their interpolations of it. But I mean, it's just so sophisticated and there's so much depth and detail to all of these. I mean, you could just stare and try to decipher and read all of these for forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing that like my understanding of Raymond Lull was that within his actual, like, academically verifiable, authentic corpus of work, that he actually was not at heart an alchemist, in terms of, like, there was nothing in it to suggest that he actually believed in actual alchemy. Because don't forget, at this time, right, so Frater Albertus, or I'm sorry, Albertus Magnus, I apologize, Albertus Magnus, again working within that Christian milieu. Thomas Aquinas was his student. He did experiments with alchemy. Back then it was extremely literal still. He did experiments with, under the auspices of the church. You had Thomas Aquinas, who was very interested in whether or not, like, alchemically produced gold could be sold on the market for at like the same valuation, things like that. But I was aware that there was a sort of pseudonymously attributed corpus of work to Raymond Lull, but that his actual writings on it were not, he was not like this groundbreaking or even, you know, as enthusiastic as his predecessors.
Yeah, I think there's different opinions and debates, and who knows what's true. I've heard people say that same thing that you're saying, and then other people or other opinions are like he was trying to keep it more occulted or hidden because he, on the surface level, was more like denouncing alchemical stuff because of his position at the time, and he didn't want to make it public. But then, or, you know, maybe he just wasn't at all, like you're saying. So interesting stuff.
Well, the thing for me is that, so this is really where, and this is where I'm willing to take a risk, right? When you're researching this stuff from the standpoint of a practitioner. So I'm gonna keep both things in mind, but I'm gonna default in this case to, because I don't feel like he was like a linchpin. And I could be wrong. Could be just showing my ignorance right now. But I don't feel like Raymond Lull is like the guy that I have to figure out whether or not he actually gave a shit about alchemy. You know, whereas there are other people that I would need to find that out about. So I feel like I would default to what is available because I don't want to lean on speculation, right? Because they could be, like, the people who are like, yeah, he didn't want anybody to know, they could be right, but it's a 50-50 shot, because that is purely their, you know, it's just their speculation. Now, when it comes to this idea of other stuff in the occult, like, you know, having these encounters and psychic experiences, spirit experiences, etheric experiences, if you have a personal gnosis of that, I think that that's perfectly valid. But when you're going through academic stuff, I think it's important to be like, okay, you got to draw a line somewhere where it's like, okay, I can't default to something that's like completely unsubstantiated without, and I think you're really good at this, and I'm getting better from, like, listening to you when you talk about stuff that's unsubstantiated, is you'll make a note. It's like, well, you know, this person said that, but who really knows? I think that that's very important to do, and I've been doing it more because you can't. It's you just, especially in a public forum, you have to throw that in there. Like, well, I don't
Yeah.
really know, and but here's what I think.
Yeah, really cool though, nonetheless. Whatever that document is, whoever made it, I don't know, pretty
Thank
badass.
you.
Lots of interesting stuff, and will probably be explored in the future. But any other notes on Raymond Lull that you wanted to throw out there before we move on?
Um, don't confuse him with William Lilly, because I'm pretty sure I did that for like 5 years. So,
All right. Well, all right. Kabbalistic pathworking. The Kabbalah, Kabbalistic pathworking, amazing. Obviously, huge, gigantic thing within esotericism. So I'm aware of the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life to a degree, and somewhat aware of the conception of its sephirotic nature, these spheres or emanations, and so on. And in my current conception, it seems to be like a fractal architecture, like perhaps on a grand macrocosmic level, the tree exists, and then to our light or spiritual body, as above, so below, like a mirror image or fractal counterpart representation. It's kind of embedded within our being, kind of cloaked in this physical vessel. So I kind of think about it like this pure crystalline light form, sparks of sephirotic divinity, coated in Maya, or the illusion of our physical makeup. And as I say in the, like coated with that materiality. So like the word illusion in regards to the body, it can seem probably a little bit counterintuitive and to a lot of people, because we think like this is a very physical, real, probably for some people it's like the most real thing. So yeah, like I've really come to think of what we call physicality as the manifested, interactive, tangible result made by the creative potentization of maybe mind forces held together by a combination of collective egregores and celestial hierarchies of beings, and so on and so forth. And so like they all kind of hold together and maintain the potentized light, quote unquote, codes to such a degree within the confines of their natural how do I put this, like layers of vibration, creating densities of interacting waveforms that manifest as what we refer to as tangible and or solid materiality, or what we would call matter. But in reality, the real illusion is the materiality. Like it is and it isn't. It's kind of like a paradoxical thing, I think. But anyway,
it's real here, the same way that like the pain in a dream is real, like in a way, by way of analogy, right? Like, okay, I think one of the most important but like secret, like obscured ways of conceptualizing the way the divine mind creates is mimicked in dreams, right? It's like it's within my mind, kind of, right? It doesn't exist in my mind. It doesn't exist inside my skull. That's not where, how is where, you know what I'm saying? That's not where that's taking place. There aren't people in my skull. When I'm having dreams and I'm dreaming about friends or family, and I have suspended my awareness of sleep. Kind of like I've drank from the river Lethe. I've lapsed into forgetfulness, and that's that kind of that period where the hypnagogic jerk happens, where you're just about falling asleep, and the physical world of your waking life is beginning to disintegrate. You're descending into like dream world, that kind of Alice in Wonderland logic, that Lewis Carroll absurdity, and then finally you lapse into this dream state and you kind of resume. It doesn't feel like you've arrived somewhere. You feel like you've just resumed your stream of consciousness. And so you're there, and but it's you. It's not the physical you, but you feel like you're in your physical body, and you are projecting certain things all around you. And but I'm not saying that. I'm not a proponent of solipsism. I don't think that all of this is in your head. I think all of it's in God's, in the nous, the spiritual divine mind, which is independent of the physical organism of a brain. And you're creating this, this thing around you, but you believe in the reality, and the laws of the dream realm are real when you're there. If you're cut, you feel pain, and but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true at a level that transcends the dream, because the dream ends and you still exist. The exterior reality resumes. And it's kind of the same idea, right? That's how early Platonic thought conceptualized it, or even before then. It's like, well, how do we know what's real and what's not real? Well, something can't be real if it eventually decays and falls apart.
Yeah.
And the real stuff does not decay. It lasts forever. It's deathless. Therefore, it has to exist outside of time. How do we access that? With our minds. And that's the closest because our minds exist outside of time. It's the psyche. It's the soul. It moves forward. And it exists kind of in I don't want to say two planes simultaneously, because I don't want to misconstrue anybody between that whole Platinian versus Iamblichian soul fully descended or partially descended argument. That's kind of not what I'm talking about in this particular thing. But there's an existence where there's a release from the temporary back to the ground, right? There's a reason we say that our waking lives are our real lives, because that's, that is what is consistent. It's like, if in a dream, it's 50-50 whether or not I'm going to walk into the same room twice. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but I know that every day my bookshelves are here, my computer's here in my way. It's like, there's a stability there that is less changeable than in my dream. And it's the same way in terms of us being here and what the soul experiences in the realm of forms, beyond causality. It's like, these things are unchanging. They don't change. They don't die. They're here forever.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about pathworking. So my assumption or hypothesis is that the notion of pathworking revolves around the idea of conscious contact, or maybe like focused and directed intentionality in some way, shape, or form, with migration from one sephirotic sphere to the other in some kind of specified manner, or like a designed like orderly step-by-step fashion of some sort, in order to get one familiar with the ways in which this sort of architecture relates and or can be experienced. But yeah, maybe you can paint me a picture and elaborate a little bit more on how you would kind of describe pathworking, its nature, and potentially an example or two.
Sure. So pathworking is a method of visualization that is, I would say, specific to the Kabbalistic model of the tree of life. Now, this is not Kabbalah with a K. It's Kabbalah with a Q, right? Because there's all these hermetic, astrological, tarot associations with this. And that's what establishes, ultimately, in the system of pathworking, what you can expect to find on the paths, right? Okay, if I traverse the path of Tau, the 32nd path, I know that I'm going to be looking at Saturnian underworld imagery. I'm going to be looking at the cherubic expressions of the the tetragrammaton. I can expect to see those there. The vision of Ezekiel. I know that I can expect to see all sorts of things associated with the underworld path, the path of Tao, and the universe card. You didn't have that before, like, the 1700s. Court de Gebelin and all those French fellas who decided the tarot is Egyptian, and it's because I've got a really good hunch. Look, it works, right? If it works, use it. But I don't know that I can get behind the philosophy of Court de Gebelin and those people. Atelier, or however you pronounce his name. So that is prerequisite, and it's all part of forming a symbolic vocabulary by which to navigate successfully and to little or no detriment to yourself the hinterlands of the astral, right? That
What's
wild
a hinterland?
It's like an unexplored territory. It's beyond what is known. You have to, in some way, this involves a discussion of the astral and the nature. There's technically the lower astral and the higher astral. The lower astral is where we, from our position subordinate to it, can influence the realm of images, the imaginal kind of mind space where we're pulling down forms to manifest them in thought, speech, action, materiality, but we're also generating certain byproducts, certain permutations that exist there and have an independent existence after long enough time or with a strong enough emotion behind them. Now there's the higher astral, and that's closer to the ideal realm. Okay, so that's not typically, like, you need to get through the lower astral. I think they would call it like the bardo or something like that, purgatory. You'd have to get through that level in order to be able to ascend, because it's there that things like addictions and hauntings, etheric astral parasites and things like that are going to weigh on you and that kind of stuff. And I don't mean it in like a physical sense, but I mean it in a way like they're going to condition your consciousness to a level of very low vibration. You're going to become, quote unquote, to use the term archaically, obsessed by these things after separation of the body, whether that happens, after death or in like an astral travel situation. So then there's a higher astral that's closer to the ideal realm, the causal realm, the realm of mind, pure mind, not intellect, but abstract mind. We're talking here about, like, basically the part of your mind that interacts with the algebra of the universe. So the part of your spiritual organism, your consciousness. So you're what you have to understand is, in order to navigate those very plastic, malleable realms of the imaginal, you do have to construct yourself some kind of model. And the reason why it works is because all images are there, right? It's the treasure house of images. It's the astral library, the Akashic record, the collective unconscious. It's all there. And so, you could see Superman, or you could see Daffy Duck, could see Freddy, Hellraiser. These kinds of archetypes are all kind of, or permutations of archetypes are hidden there. This is also typically where you find something like the dweller of the threshold, a dweller of the threshold. There's not just one, so you need to construct something there. If it's a tarot card image, you're not superimposing that, because some version of that archetype already exists in the collective imagination. So that this is what I'm going to be working with every time. And one of the best ways to know that the pathworking has or can go wrong is when you do not observe consonant imagery. So what does this require? This requires that you assimilate these images, these symbols, right? That's why they call it, these are the teachings, these pictographs. they communicate with that level of our being more immediately and more deep, more profoundly. And that's because this part of ourselves is pre-verbal, not only as individuals, but as a species, as a collective that existed there. Sensory sense perception of images, of colors, of shades, and their associations with emotion or abstract thought happened before language. Language is kind of these safe roads that we built into. I mean, it's amazing. They've organized our world, and it's very important. And it can sound when I talk about language like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth, because I'm just acknowledging that it's a limitation in one sense, but it's also helpful in another. That's all. So it's like anything else. There's part good, part bad. But this part of ourselves is pre-verbal, and so it actually, language does less good here than images. So we're going to want to use images superimposed into the astral to lead us where we want to go and not get distracted. So you have to assimilate the symbolic vocabulary that is necessary, and you can't just learn it by rote. It has to be assimilated into your psyche, your consciousness. You have to constantly see it. You have to essentially burn these things into your sphere of sensation. So that is the first choice, so that you're not in the middle of a path working and Big Bird shows up, because you've got some emotional attachment to that from when you were 6, and now it's now intrusive. You have to be able to set that magical space, set your wards, don't let anything in outside of that until you call it, right? So and that's magic versus mediumism. Right? Mediumism is like, I'm going to open myself up to the universe and the joy and the love, and then who the fuck knows what's going to happen? I'm not letting a stranger into my house, let alone, my inner sanctum, my psyche. So again, this is an issue people have. They don't want to believe it's real. They want to believe that it's psychologized. Well, God bless you. Good luck. But another thing that you need to do is you need to be able to sit. You need to be able to concentrate. You need to be able to focus. If you can't do that, you can't clear your mind, you can't direct your thoughts, you can't hold your attention for longer than 30 seconds, then you have a lot of work to do before you can do a path working. If it is to be more than mere fantasy. So another thing that you need to do is you need to be able to visualize. Believe it or not, a lot of people can't do that. I've met a lot of people that have convinced themselves they have aphantasia, which means that they can't visualize things in the eye of the mind, the imaginal faculty. I say imaginal because when you say imagination, people think it's not real. Imaginal is different. I'm creating images. It doesn't mean it's not real. It's real the way, it's real on its own terms, in its own realm, and it is just as objective as anything else. So you need to be able to do those things, and then you start out typically with path working. They're guided. You're listening to somebody. That's just training. I'm not saying you can't have somewhat of a profound experience, sure. But at first it's just kind of the training wheels. And then later you learn to traverse the path in a ritual setting, and you learn to commune with specific types of entities there, and that are associated with those paths. And eventually they lead you up the tree of life, right? You could look at the path of Tav leading from Malkuth to Yesod as the lower astral. You could look at, the upper quote unquote part of Yesod as the upper astral. And you can kind of go from there, and it's a map of the psyche. It's the map of the spiritual realms, right? Because you can divide the tree into the 4 worlds. And it does fractalize. It goes on. There are trees inside spheres. It's multi-dimensional. It's not just a single thing. And at the end of the day, it is a lineal glyph. It's a model that we use. It is one that is geometrically harmonious, geometrically significant. Absolutely. It tells us a lot about the relationship to the macrocosm and the microcosm on a quantum level, as we're kind of understanding it now. But again, it's a lineal glyph of the Ptolemaic model of the universe. So it's been with us for a really long time, way before Moses de Leon. This kind of conception of the spheres has been around with us since at least Plato. It either hasn't been this sophisticated, or it's been part of the agrapha dogmata that Aristotle talks about in the Platonic tradition in his Physica and metaphysics.
What's that? Agrapha.
Agrapha Dogmata is the unwritten teaching.
Oh, okay.
So there are claims, and the most I guess legitimate one would be from Aristotle, right? He mentions it twice in Physics and Metaphysics, and he talks about the fact that there was, oh yeah, absolutely, in the Platonic school there was what Plato wrote, and there was the shit that didn't get written down, and I think a lot of people understanding that now from and like, look, he said this. These are authentic works of Aristotle. He's not, and this was the empiricist, right? Like Aristotle rejected the realm of forms. So he's not somebody who's going to mince words or try and lead people on. He's all about precision and that kind of stuff. So empiricism. So for him to say that twice in two major works, it's like, you got to take that seriously. There was an unwritten, and he does not imply what that pertained to. So I don't want anybody to get it twisted and think I'm saying they were doing Kabbalistic pathworkings in ancient Greece. I'm just saying, this stuff has been around a lot longer than the Hebrew Kabbalah, or at least contemporaneous with it, right? I think like the period of Plato would have been the same period as like the Psalms, and back then they had like Merkaba wisdom and stuff. So and it was a similar thing in Merkaba mysticism, Merkaba traditions, is that typically the Merkaba mystic would descend, they wouldn't ascend. But the interesting thing about the tree of life is that in order to move upward, you need to first, the only path available to you is the path of the underworld. So that's a path of Tao. That's very interesting too.
That is interesting. Yeah. And then so like I've heard, what is there, like 32 different paths that one can go about within the different available options or something like that within the pathworking.
Yeah. It's got 32 levels and a couple of side missions, side quests.
What would a pathworking look like on it? Maybe just give like a very simple overview of going about working a particular path.
Okay, so you'll hear basically what a Golden Dawn pathworking might look like, and actually I would highly recommend that people get I want to say it's the Garden of Pomegranates, Scrying on the Tree of Life. So that's an Israel Regardie book that was then later re-released and edited, and they added an addendum, a second book to the volume by Chicken Tabby, Cicero. So the second half is called Scrying on the Tree of Life. The first half is Israel Regardie's Garden of Pomegranates, and there are excellent pathworkings that you can record and then play. Do it on your phone and then play back while you're in that meditative, visualized state. The first thing that I would do is I would robe up and I would set my space, do all my prophylactic work, right? I would do my pentagram rituals, my hexagram rituals, all that stuff. I mean, it's a lot, but that's the kind of stuff that I do, right? I chose this path. I found that it works. I'm not going to half-ass it. I would sit down, do all that outer stuff. I'd place my ass in the west facing east. I would probably select for me, magical work is most effective at the full of the moon. Interior visualization and meditative work is best done in the dark of the moon. So that is typically the time when less etheric energy is available for magical work in the dark of the moon. This has to do with the etheric tides, and so I would be doing I would try and time important visualization work like this during that period, and then I would just make sure that just the Kairos was dialed in. Nothing too crazy going on with Mercury. I've experimented doing stuff with like moon void, of course, in the traditional sense, right? Hellenistic astrology, meaning that it's not making any aspects, rather than switching houses, stuff like that. So you can try that stuff out. anyway, so I'd get that going. I would get myself to a place where I was ready to visualize. I'd definitely do a middle pillar before then to center myself, balance myself, and activate we call them galgalim because it's a Hebrew word for, swirling, but really chakras on the Hebrew, or the Kabbalistic middle pillar version. I'm not going to do the Vedantic, the Hebrew 7 chakra middle pillar. Not what I do. And then we would I'd start. You always start in Malkuth. And it involves a lot of this stuff. At a certain point, they say, it's left up to the quote ingenium of the adept. You by this point, you kind of know what you're doing. So however you need to get yourself there, as long as it's within the bounds of proper safety protocols, do it that way. But use your imagination. So you start out in, let's say, the temple of Malkuth, right? And it's got all the appropriate colors, citrine olive, russet black. You've got the appropriate archangelic figure there, Sandalphon. Depending on what lineage you're working in, you might want to give a grade sign or admission badge or a handshake, whatever it is. You start out there. You must know before you go in where you're going and why. Okay, you must know that. There has to be you can't just say, well, let's see what's going to happen. You should know what you're doing, right? I mean, if you've gone to all this trouble, that doesn't have to be crazy. You don't have to go all the way to Gimel. You could just stay on Tav. You could move around a little bit, go to Shin, go to Kof, play around with those dynamics. I like to stay off the path of pay for anybody who knows what that's about. Anyway, so I would then find a doorway. I would tell Sandalphon, I would communicate with the archangel of the place, and I would say, look, this is where I want to go. Having been granted the access for that, just establishing my contact really is what I'm doing with the overarching intelligence of the sphere. I would then pass through either we call them a shar, a gate, right? I would either go through a door, or I would go through a curtain or something like that. And it would have, like, let's say, either like a T, like a Tau cross, or it would have the actual Hebrew letter Tau or Tav over it. It'd go through in a certain manner, and on the other side, I should expect to see, perhaps, the terrestrial sphere, the heaven of Asaya of Saturn, right, with its rings. Or I could see Saturn in the mythological context, whether that be Greek or whether that be Roman. I could see the scythe. You could see symbols of the underworld, Atum Ra and Horus, really, but that's the Coptic name is Huri, and Thoth on the solar bark of the sun going through the underworld. I could pass through into the belly of Nut, into the Duat, but just all underworld consonants. In other words, if I walked into a clear green field, I probably haven't left Malkuth. Right? So you're going to want to rectify that, and how you're going to want to do this, you want to go back through the door you just came through and make sure you're back in Malkuth. See if all the imagery there is good. Recenter yourself, invoke the divine, always invoke the highest first, and then try and make the connection again. If you just can't get it, get out. But don't just open your eyes like waking a sleepwalker. Reverse what you did. Walk out the way you would have to if it was a physical location. And bring yourself back slowly. Now, if it works out, you find yourself in the underworld, you got to figure out what the hell you're doing there. You should know that ahead of time. If you want to get to Yesod, you need to know all the consonances of Yesod. So let's say you travel through the underworld, the 12 gates. You go through that. It's not too crazy. Maybe you're a little pressed for time, as we all are. So it's pretty quick. All the doors are open, let's just say. But if you encounter resistance there, don't ignore it. Make note of it. Find yourself in Yesod. It should be like a purple or of a violet hue. there should be some symbolism involving the number 9. There should be some symbolism involving silver or the moon, and then from there you would speak with, let's say, Gabriel. You would vibrate. So establishing yourself in these spheres typically requires that you vibrate a divine name, right? So if I were in Malkuth, I would go down the hierarchies. I start out with Adonai Haaretz, that's the highest divine name. Then I would go down, and contact the archangel, contact the angel, talk about, vibrate Aretz, meaning earth, I would do the same in Yesod. I would do the same in Tav too. I would vibrate the name of the path. I would go through into, or, so if, let's say, okay, I was in the Temple of Malkuth and I wanted to enter the underworld, maybe that curtain, instead of having the letter T on it, if you really wanted to soak in a specific type of imagery, you could pass through a curtain that was essentially the universe or the world card of the tarot, and just dive into it. You could do that, and then you get into Yesod. You make contact with Gabriel, vibrate the divine names, and then see what happens there. Maybe you go into meditation and you meditate in the Temple of Yesod, right? Maybe you're trying to activate astral travel. Maybe you're trying to invoke lucid dreaming or things like that. That's work that you would do in the Temple of Yesod. And then and you really go anywhere from there. It's just, you've got to take your time, you've got to focus and do it right, and always come back the way you went in, as if they were physical places. Come out of it slowly, stretch, close down your ritual space, take a few breaths, and then write everything down immediately.
Wow, that was fucking awesome. That's incredible.
I mean, this is the kind of work that I've been doing for, almost a decade. So it's
I can see
that and many other things. It's like, that's not even like the main menu item, like that's an appetizer.
Yeah. And this is obviously why it's so important that somebody becomes so familiar and well versed in understanding how everything should be in terms of its associations and what to look for, and knowing your map before going in, because obviously, like you were saying, you can go in through the wrong doors or whatever. And wow, that was just so interesting.
I mean, that's the whole thing, right? Some people are like, well, I've had success. Well, good for you. It's kind of like when people eat sushi all the time. It's not if, it's when you get a parasite. It's like, that's just what it is. So the thing is, like, you may not even be aware of the detriment. It may be, and that's the brilliance of the Outer Order of the Golden Dawn, the alchemical order, the Salvia Coagula, is that it forces you. You go through these rituals, and then shit starts happening to you in your mundane life, and you're like, well, my mundane life isn't my spiritual life. Why did I get fired from my job? Well, maybe you're in Malkuth, and it's time for you to take a reassessment of your ability to lead a stable life. Okay, so that might not seem spiritual, but you have a fucking problem. So, you've got to work on these things. And so it also draws your attention to the fact that, like, everything I'm doing spiritually manifests itself physically. They're tied immediately. It's like pulling a string. If I pull one end, I'm pulling the other. So you have to learn that it's like, yeah, you might not even know what you're doing, because you have this toggling, this sort of like partitioning between your magical life and your regular life. And sometimes we maintain these blind spots because they're difficult to look at, and they put us in a position of aporia, which is like, I don't know where I stand, I'm struggling, and you got to be there, and you should be there regularly.
All right, well, one more thing before we close out is I wanted to talk a little bit about maybe if you could give like sort of a little comprehensive overview of the levels and layers of the spiritual light body, because there's a lot of terminology with this, and I know we kind of touched on this a bit in our last podcast, but I was reading something in regards to the levels of density kind of associated with the spiritual light body, and I want to say it was actually something of Stavish's that I was reading, but yeah, it's like we've got the subtle body, the resurrection body, astral body, spirit body, or radiant body, etheric body, all this different terminology. Some of it is the same or maybe synonymous. And so I just wanted to see if you could kind of lay it all out, different levels or layers, and how they kind of interact.
Sure. Well, I mean, every school of thought has its differences in terms of the stratification of this thing that we're talking about. And one thing that's really important to keep in mind is that they're not distinct. Meaning it's not like walking from one room of a house to another. It's more like walking from one end of a hall to the other. So they exist sort of coterminously, meaning in the same place. They interpenetrate each other. It's more like a light spectrum. There's no clear visible delineation between that, like liminal space when one is turning into the other. It's all connected, right? So that's important to note for conceptualization purposes, especially because of the way that it is talked about, highly fragmented. So I tend to particularize these things in terms of the parts of the self or the soul. And so that starts out, we know that there were at least 9 parts categorized in the ancient Egyptian conception. Some of it makes a lot of sense. Some of it doesn't. The threefold or fourfold system might work better. The Kaibit, Ba, Ka, and Ak, or something like that, rather than all these other parts of the soul that they recognize. But what's interesting to me is what has worked for me in correspondence with the model of the 4 worlds, right? The Kabbalistic model of the 4 worlds is kind of basing my idea of, or the way that I model these things on the 4 worlds concept, and essentially the interpretation of theosophy, which was really in interpreting the Eastern Vedantic kind of conception of the way that the soul projects downward into the material. It's projecting in like this quote unquote downward trajectory of density, as you put it earlier. It's a trajectory of density, not one of like spatial location, necessarily up, down, left, right. None of that stuff means anything at a certain point of rarefication. So it's quote unquote projecting from spiritual realms. Excuse me. It comes down from these spiritual realms, which are they're absolutely unintelligible by the physical. In order to get there, you have to leave, right? The Rosicrucian saying only those lightly armed will attain the summit. You can't pass the abyss. You can't cross Thoth and be in body. So that's not something that you're going to understand while you're embodied in incarnation. You can think about it, you can try and conceptualize it, but you will have virtually no understanding of it while you exist as whoever the hell you are in this lifetime. From there, you project down into the causal bodies, and each one of these bodies, so to speak, they're not necessarily this outline of you. It's kind of this field of consciousness, the spectrum of consciousness that becomes more and more dense until it reaches what is your ego, which is the part of you that is the part of your psyche that is most identified with the physical you and the physical occurrences of your daily life. But there are other parts of your psyche. It's a broad band spectrum, that are affecting you. This is why you have premonitions. It's how you're able to access intuition. It's all that stuff is because it's a broad band, and your ego is at the fucking bottom of it. It's the densest part, and it's tied to the densest physical part of you, this body, this meat coat, and where it goes, what it enjoys, what it hates, and how it's going to stay alive. So it descends. You have an upper and a lower level, right? Because we're talking about spectrums. We're talking about, we're saying it in terms of levels and partitioning it just for the sake of being able to communicate the analogy. But in reality, you're at the part of the mental causal body that is closest to the spiritual. Then at a certain point, you get to the part of the mental causal body that is now morphing into the astral or emotional body, something like that. And that's more like the realm of intuition. That's more the realm, the lower part of the astral. Again, the astral body. The planes and the bodies are a one-to-one. So if I'm saying astral plane, I'm also, of necessity, I'm explaining astral body. Your astral body, or the segment of your spectrum of consciousness which can interact with that plane, is of that plane. It's on that plane at all times. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't, it doesn't descend. It's just where your focus is how you're going to toggle through it. So part of spiritual training is to broaden your awareness so that your focus isn't so tight that I can only be here or there. At a certain point, you can exist and feel in multiple parts of that spectrum of consciousness, all being mediated through the persona that has come to understand them and learn to deal with them. From there, you go from the higher astral, the lower astral, you move into the physical, but the higher physical, which is a very rarefied substance, which we call chi or prana, the etheric body. Now, the etheric body, like etheric energy, is tantamount in the Kabbalistic system with the nefesh. Okay, so it's impressionable. It's subject to the emotions. It changes based on your emotions, but it can also be moved by you. And if it's not being moved and directed by you, if it hasn't been linked up with the conscious mind in conscious awareness, and it's basically this appendage that you don't know you have, it's completely atrophying, then somebody else is going to move it for you. So somebody that is more in their own will, somebody that has this kind of knack for being sort of expanding their field, and whether they realize it or not, can influence people. They're going to influence your etheric body, and by way of that, they're going to get into your field, and they're going to influence your thought body, and whether intentionally or not, implant those, what we were talking about the last time, those thought forms in there. And a lot of times you think those are your ideas and those are your feelings, but a lot of times they're not. And part, again, of this spiritual training is learning to differentiate between something is yours, originating in you, or something that is implanted, whether intentionally or not. It's not 9 times out of 10. So the etheric body is the higher version of, or the higher aspect of the physical, because it is physical. You can feel it when you can feel it when you do energy work. You can move it through acupuncture, and you can see it. So it's not, that's where people go wrong. They say, okay, what's the difference between etheric and astral sight? Astral sight is in my mind. I can sense something that's there on the astral, right? It's not actually physically here, but it sort of interpenetrates this broadband field of consciousness, and I can, over years of training in various circumstances, I can see that appear, but I know that it's not actually physically in the 3-dimensional space. It's just that it's being communicated to the part of me that is on the astral, and that part is seeing it. I have now successfully learned, I don't have to be in pathworking to be on the astral. I have expanded my consciousness to the point where I can exist on both those planes simultaneously. So what I'm perceiving on the astral is being mediated to the personal version of me. I can see it there, but I know that it's not. And it's kind of the same way when you let's say you're doing the lesser ritual of the pentagram, you're drawing those pentagrams. After a while, you're projecting them into the room. You know that it's not, that astral vision is not there, but it's projected in this kind of like two-dimensional vision that you have. It's very difficult to explain because what I'm talking about here is a transcendent, holistic sort of grasp on these different levels of your own consciousness that can seem, when you first experience them, they can seem completely foreign to your idea of what consciousness is. So then obviously you get to the physical body, which is influenced by the etheric, which is influenced by the astral, which is influenced by the mental, which is et cetera, and so on and so forth. And so that's how you also have these ways that, like, you can have psychosomatic disease, you can make yourself sick, you can have emotional disease, and things like that, and you can have a lot of disease that comes from your nefesh. Kabbalistically, your chi being blocked or moved in ways that are counterproductive to its natural flow. And so that's the entire chain of being there. The light body, to me, is when you harmonize all of these things, you achieve what the Greeks called again, I was talking about in an earlier conversation, the upsilon being translated as a U rather than an F or like a V. You have something that people have scratched their heads over for hundreds of years, the Algoides, and particularly Porphyry talks about it. He talks about it as this vehicle. Some people call it the Merkaba, or the vehicle of light, the aura maybe. But he calls it the Algoides, and people had a really hard time figuring out what that was. But if you realize that the upsilon is cognate to a V, then you read it as Avgoides, which means the egg body, the egg form, the egg shape. Avgo means egg in Greek. So he's talking about something that's shaped like an egg. And what does that sound like? That sounds like the aura. And essentially that the egg body, the egg form, that becomes luminous when integrated. For instance, when that is the totality of your microcosm in the physical realm, and it's composed of astral and etheric energy. And when you're able to see etheric energy, one of the first things that you notice is, like, I must not be doing this right because I don't see auras the way they're traditionally depicted. And then over the years, you start to realize, like, most people don't have fully developed enclosed auras. It just doesn't. I don't know if that's a consequence of, like, modern pollutants or the way stress, the way we live our life, 5G. I have no fucking clue why that is, but I've seen maybe 3 people in my entire life that have an intact auric body, and that essentially is the body of light. And it comes by, and that will become stronger the more you integrate everything that we've talked about, the more you can contain within the mediating center of your personal consciousness, while the other parts of your broadband frequency of consciousness are at work in tandem, and assimilate and integrate that. And then there's exercises that you do, the visualization, the crafting of the body of the light, the etheric and astral simulacrum that you can then transfer consciousness to, and some people say is the vehicle beyond, with which you will be able to leave the causal spheres at death. So we've gotten very, very new agey, but this is, this kind of shit, it does become a core tenet of a lot of, the magical worldview at a certain point. It's just something that I think you need a very firm grounding, and then go forth, keep an open mind, and learn to experience it before you make any decisions. So in other words, my experience, my model of this entire thing is based on my experience. My experience is not based on the pre-digested model.
Ooh, alrighty. That concludes another epic episode of Esoterica podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. If you want more, check out patreon.com/Aetherica. Check out and subscribe to the YouTube, if you will, please. Follow on the Instagram, all that good stuff. For myself, check me out at Philosophical Minds podcast. And how about for you, Ike?
Yeah, that was a tremendous question to ask me at like 1:30 in the morning. Okay, like,
You
I'm
answered it amazingly.
I'm probably not going to be able to go to sleep now. You see, you're keeping me from integrating my astral body.
I apologize.
No, no, this is great, dude. I love it. If anybody wants to hear more of my craziness, youtube.com/at arcanum, ARCANVM. And you can look in the about section of any video, I'll have my email, my Instagram, and all that jazz there. So hopefully you guys continue listening into the Aetherica podcast. This is a lot of fun and a pleasure. And I love being here with you in the Garden of Astral Delights.
Indeed. Alrighty. Until next time.
See ya.